February 17, 1958. A basement in Harlem. Bumpy Johnson walked in unarmed. The Mafia never came back. The room was 20 feet by 15. Concrete walls. Water stains. One hanging bulb. A wooden table. 2 chairs. 5 men had entered through the back alley at 9 p.m. 4 Italian. 1 Irish. All armed. All connected to the Genovese family operation that had been pushing into Harlem for 6 months. Numbers, heroin, protection. Systematic. Organized. Profitable. They were waiting for Bumpy Johnson. At 9:47 p.m., the door opened. Bumpy walked in alone. Dark suit. White shirt. No tie. No coat. No weapon visible. His hands hung at his sides, empty, palms slightly forward. Not a gesture of surrender. Just a statement of fact. He looked at each man. Did not speak. Walked to the empty chair. Sat down. The silence lasted 11 seconds. Salvatore Sally Burns Lombardozzi broke it. He was the Genovese underboss for East Harlem operations. 43 years old. 26 arrests. 0 convictions. He sat across from Bumpy, a cigarette burning between his fingers. "You came alone," Sally said. Bumpy said nothing. "We heard you were smart," Sally continued. "Thought maybe that was just talk. Negro reputation up in Harlem, you know? But coming here to us by yourself." He smiled. "That's either very smart or very stupid." Bumpy's expression did not change. Sally leaned forward. "We got a situation, Bumpy. Business situation. The families, we've been operating in Harlem 6 months now. Numbers, horse, protection. Clean operation. Professional. And we keep hearing your name. People say, talk to Bumpy. Bumpy runs things. But we look around, we don't see nothing. No organization. No muscle. Just an old con who did 10 years in Sing Sing. He took a drag from his cigarette. So we're wondering, what exactly do you run?" Bumpy looked at the table. At the cigarette ash Sally had let fall on the wood. At the water ring from a glass that wasn't there anymore. At the key someone had left sitting in the center. An old key. Brass. Darkened with age. He picked up the key. Held it between his thumb and forefinger. Looked at it for 3 seconds. Then placed it back on the table. Exactly where it had been. He still had not spoken. This moment mattered. Sally's jaw tightened. The other 4 men shifted. One of them, a man named Tommy Dio, put his hand inside his jacket. Not drawing. Just touching. "See, here's our problem," Sally said, his voice harder now. "We need to know if you're reasonable. If you're a businessman. Because if you are, we can work something out. Territory. Percentages. The families are willing to be generous to local operators who cooperate. But if you're one of these," he searched for the word, "romantic types, thinks Harlem belongs to the colored, thinks the old ways still matter, then we got a different kind of conversation." Bumpy's eyes moved from the key to Sally's face. He held the look for 5 seconds. Then looked away. Not down. Not in submission. Just away. Like Sally had become irrelevant. Sally's face flushed. "You think this is a game? You think because you're in your own neighborhood, we can't touch you? Let me explain something about how this works." Bumpy stood up. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just stood. Straightened his jacket with 2 fingers. Looked at the door. "Sit down," Sally said. "We're not done talking." Bumpy walked toward the door. "I said sit down." Sally's voice rose. The 4 other men stood. Tommy Dio's hand came out of his jacket holding a .38. Bumpy stopped at the door. Put his hand on the knob. Turned it. Did not open it. He looked back at Sally. At the cigarette still burning in his hand. At the 4 armed men now standing. At the basement they thought gave them control. He opened the door. Stepped through. closed it behind him. Silence. Tommy Dio looked at Sally. What the hell just happened? Sally stared at the closed door. At the key still sitting on the table. I don't know. Should we? No. Sally crushed his cigarette on the table. We don't do nothing. Not yet. Let me think. Bumpy walked up the basement stairs. Into the alley. The February cold hit his face. He turned left. Walked 2 blocks. Stopped at a corner where 3 men were standing. Young, watchful, not speaking to each other but together in a way that mattered. One of them straightened when he saw Bumpy. Everything good? Bumpy nodded once. Kept walking. Behind him, the 3 young men stayed on that corner. They would stay there all night. And the next night. And the night after that. How did it get here? Bumpy Johnson was 52 years old. He had spent 10 years in Sing Sing for armed robbery. Before that, 7 years in various county jails. Before that, a childhood in Charleston, South Carolina that ended when he was 14 and killed a man who had put hands on his sister. He came to Harlem in 1930. The neighborhood was controlled by a white gangster named Dutch Schultz, who ran numbers and policy through violence and terror. Bumpy worked as an enforcer. Then as a manager. Then he went to prison and Schultz got killed and the landscape changed. When Bumpy came out in 1956, Harlem had no clear boss. The Italian families had moved in during the war. The police had gotten more aggressive. The neighborhood itself had changed, more desperate, more violent, less organized. Bumpy did not announce himself. Did not make speeches. Did not challenge anyone directly. He walked. He listened. He showed up in places at specific times. He remembered names, faces, debts, insults. He never raised his voice. He never explained his decisions. He never justified his presence. Within 6 months, every numbers runner in Harlem knew who to answer to. Within a year, the street dealers knew which corners were whose. Within 18 months, the police knew which arrests would stick and which wouldn't. Bumpy had not built an organization in the traditional sense. He had become the center of gravity. Not through violence, though he was capable of it. Not through money, though he controlled significant cash flow. Through something else. Something the Genovese family didn't understand when they decided to expand into Harlem. He controlled legitimacy. In a neighborhood where the police were corrupt and the law was a joke, Bumpy Johnson had become the standard. Not the boss. Not the king. The measure. You could operate in Harlem if your operation was measured against Bumpy's rules and found acceptable. If not, you couldn't. It was that simple. The Italians didn't understand this. They saw Harlem as territory. Empty real estate waiting for professional management. They saw Bumpy as a local boss who would either cooperate or be eliminated. They had started moving in 6 months ago. Quietly at first. A numbers spot here. A heroin connection there. Protection for a grocery store. Normal expansion. Professional. Nothing Bumpy couldn't have lived with. But then they made a mistake. Subscribe and leave a comment. The most important part of this story is still ahead. A 17-year-old boy named Marcus Webb ran numbers for Bumpy on 145th Street. Good kid. Fast. Reliable. Stayed out of trouble. He had 4 younger siblings and a mother who cleaned offices at night. In January 1958, 2 Italian collectors came to Marcus and told him he worked for them now. Same job. Same corner. Different boss. They offered him a raise, $20 more a week. Marcus said he needed to think about it. That night, the 2 collectors came back. Marcus was gone. So they went to his apartment. Broke down the door. Beat his mother. Told her she had 48 hours to produce her son or they'd come back for the siblings. Marcus went to Bumpy. Bumpy listened. Asked 3 questions. Who were they? What did they look like? Did they say which family? Marcus answered. Bumpy nodded. Told him to stay home with his family for 3 days. After that, go back to the corner. Everything would be handled. Marcus asked what Bumpy was going to do. Bumpy said nothing. 2 days later, Bumpy walked into a social club on Pleasant Avenue. Italian neighborhood. Genovese territory. He sat at the bar. Ordered coffee. Waited. Sal Lombardozzi walked in 20 minutes later. Stopped when he saw Bumpy. Then smiled. Sat down next to him. Bumpy Johnson. In my neighborhood. This is unexpected. Need to talk, Bumpy said. So talk. Not here. Somewhere private. Sally studied him. You come alone? Yes. You armed? No. Sally's smile widened. You got balls, I'll give you that. Okay. Tomorrow night. I got a place in Harlem. Basement. Nice and quiet. You come there, we'll talk business like gentlemen. What address? Sally told him. Bumpy nodded. Finished his coffee. Left. Sally watched him go. Then turned to his crew. Get 4 guys. Good ones. Tomorrow night, we settle this Harlem situation permanently. That's how Bumpy ended up in that basement on February 17th, outnumbered 5-1. Unarmed. In enemy territory. Except it wasn't enemy territory. It was Harlem. And that made all the difference. This decision would affect everyone. Sally Burns spent 2 hours in that basement after Bumpy left. Smoking. Thinking. The 4 men with him said nothing. They had all seen what happened. A man walked in unarmed, said nothing, and walked out. And somehow, in that silence, they all felt like they'd lost something. He disrespected us, Tommy Deal finally said. We can't let that stand. He didn't disrespect us, Sally said quietly. That's the problem. What? He showed us we don't matter. That's different than disrespect. Disrespect you can punish. Not mattering. Sally crushed another cigarette. That's something else. So what do we do? Sally looked at the key still sitting on the table. We leave. Tonight. We pull out of Harlem. All operations. Numbers, horse, protection. Everything. What? We can't just. Yes, we can. And we will. Sally stood. Because if we stay, we have to do something about Bumpy. And if we do something about Bumpy, we start a war in Harlem. And if we start a war in Harlem, we're going to find out that every dealer, every runner, every kid on every corner knows exactly whose side they're on. And it's not ours. He picked up the key. Looked at it. Put it in his pocket. He walked in here unarmed. Alone. Because he knew we couldn't touch him. Not because he's strong. Because the neighborhood won't let us. That's not a fight we can win. The next day, every Genovese operation in Harlem shut down. The collectors stopped collecting. The dealers stopped dealing. The protection offers were quietly withdrawn. Marcus Webb went back to his corner on 145th Street. Nobody bothered him again. Bumpy never spoke about what happened in that basement. But the story spread anyway. The way stories do when they're important. A man walked into a room with 5 armed mobsters. Unarmed. Said nothing. Walked out. And the mob left Harlem. This was the moment everyone would remember. 3 months later, a federal investigation into the Genovese family found the key Sally Burns had taken from that basement. It was entered into evidence as Item 127 brass key, origin unknown, found in subject's personal effects. The FBI asked Sally what the key opened. He said he didn't know. He'd found it on a table in Harlem and kept it. A souvenir. Of what, he wouldn't say. The key was eventually lost in an evidence warehouse in Queens. Its purpose was never determined. But in Harlem, everyone knew what that key represented. It was the key to the basement where the decision was made. Where power was measured not by guns or money, but by something deeper. Legitimacy. Authority. The right to be present. Bumpy Johnson never carried a weapon after that night. He didn't need to. His presence was the weapon. The Mafia understood what many never did. In Harlem, Bumpy wasn't just tolerated. He was the measure of what was acceptable. Share and subscribe. This is how stories like this survive. Sally Burns died in 1973. At his funeral, someone asked his son what the old man had learned in all his years running with the mob. The son said his father told him once, "I met a lot of dangerous men. But only one man ever made me leave a room knowing I'd lost before I understood the game." He never said the name. He didn't have to. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968. Natural causes. His funeral filled the streets of Harlem for 6 blocks. The key was never found. But the lesson remained: you don't need weapons when the neighborhood itself is your authority.